And good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to another live Xanadu Gallery Art Business Academy online critique group. Today is Wednesday, April 29th, 2020. It is good to be here with you in another Wednesday session. A lot of fun last week doing the Ask Me Anything session. And if you didn't get a chance to watch that, I would encourage you to just hop on to after this broadcast is over. If you scroll down on the broadcast page, you can see our archive of past sessions and catch that. Appreciated all the questions we got last time. And then just by way of, whoops, so let me get over here. Just giving you a little bit of where I am and coming to you from today. So the last couple of weeks we've been down in Scottsdale, and of course, with everything going on, the gallery's closed, not a lot going on down there. And it started to get a little warm this week. On Monday, we had, or excuse me, no, it would have been late last week, we had our first 90-degree day. And then Saturday, I think it was, we had our first 100-degree day. And tomorrow in Scottsdale, it's going to be 105 degrees. And so we decided that rather than hang out there, we would head up to to the Pine Top Gallery. We needed to bring some art up to get ready for the summer season. This seemed like a great time to do it. Hopefully, we'll just be here for about a week, and then it should cool back down a little bit in Scottsdale and get back down there. It's been very interesting over the last several weeks. As I mentioned last week, as the kind of quarantine situation continued on, I think a lot of us initially were wondering what's going on in the art market. Are we going to continue to sell art and see sales? And definitely things have slowed down, but I just want to keep reiterating that art is continuing to sell. We're continuing to see that at the gallery. And this last week was no exception. Had a number of significant sales. So I would just encourage you to keep plugging away. And of course, that is part of why we're here today, is to take a look at each other's art, focus on what's important to us, and keep pushing forward, and hopefully help one another become the best artists that we can be, and also to build our art businesses. And so with that, today's featured artist is Sydney Stieb. And Sydney is here with us live. Sydney, tell us where you're joining us from.
I'm in the northern tip of Michigan. We're about an hour's drive from Mackinac City.
And it's not 105 degrees there today.
We barely hit 60 a couple days ago. It's sitting in the high 50s, and it's pouring rain.
Yeah. So definitely, we've got folks joining us from all over the country and all over the world, all different cultures and climates, and it's fun to be here and to have this conversation. And Sydney, why don't we begin by having you tell us a little bit of your background, where your interest in art came from, and kind of how you developed into the work that you're doing today.
I don't know where it first came from. I think it just appeared. I used to like to draw the characters that were in the newspaper. It says draw me, and you sent it into this company, and of course they told you, oh, you've got great talent, and here's information about joining our school and all that stuff. And I think my parents humored me, but I was looking around and I found something yesterday, and you could see this, but it's one of my first books. And I think that's probably what led me to start drawing, because I started using this book. It's so beaten up. And the last printing was 1949, which is the year I was born. So it's quite an old book, but it's really a good book too. So I still keep it around in my art library for drawing practice. I always loved art in school. Didn't do much except, take all the art classes that were offered in school. And it wasn't until maybe 30 years ago that I lost someone very near and dear to me, and it left a big hole in my life. And I just decided I needed to fill that with something. And I found an artist. I heard about her that was teaching oil painting. So I started taking oil painting lessons from her every Monday at the Senior Citizen Center. And we had to pay $5 a month to join the Senior Center, and that's all it cost us, except our supplies. And I went for 3 years, I painted with her every single Monday. And she would get little shows together in the city parks, and she got me to have a little show in one of the insurance companies, and she was really great. She was quite an inspiration. And I tried to teach myself watercolor painting at that time, but there wasn't any watercolor painters that I could regularly take from. And it wasn't until I came back to California 17 years ago, and then it still took me a while to learn about a watercolor artist that was right here in my town, and started taking the watercolor classes from her. So I wanted to do watercolor. I loved watercolor paintings. I loved not having to deal with the messy, sticky paint and the awful smells and all that. It was, I appreciate it. And some of my dearest friends are oil painters. And I appreciate it. I value it. I've sold a lot in oil painting, but I just want to try something new. And it was watercolor. And it's just easy to tote around with you. And so I took from a lady here in town, and but she just did the follow me painting, where she would paint something and then you would paint that part, you go back, and then you'd go back to her desk and she'd show you the next part. And I never really learned the basics. So I struggled when I tried to paint by myself, um, because I was just imitating what she did and without understanding the mixtures of water and paint and how it all influenced each other and how it happens. And I hated my paintings that I tried to do by myself. And we had a really bad winter here one winter, and I spent probably 8 hours a day on YouTube, watching every watercolor artist that was on there, and fell in love with a couple that I still follow today, and like Sterling Edwards. I loved artists that are accomplished artists, but they're still willing to teach.
Yeah.
And they're willing to teach from the beginning. And I just got a couple artists that I just started following and watching technique, not really copying their paintings, but just watching technique and watching what happens and getting advice from them.
And so, as your technique and style developed, how have you shared and shown and sold your work?
I belong to a art cooperative here in town. We have our own little gallery, and it's not working out too well. I haven't sold any big price items, and I attribute it to the looks of the gallery. To me, it looks like a souvenir shop.
Hmm.
And the floors are awful. We don't own the building, we only lease. And it's got the black and white checkerboard, but it's all scuffed up. The white's all scuffed up. And even my sister said, it looks so cluttered, it's small.
So
And
not really conducive to the sales
no,
of art.
and I joined an art guild at the Crooked Tree Art Center in Petoskey, Michigan. And they've been doing a lot to promote artists. And we had a guild show. It was the first show I've been in. And the second day of the show, the gal at the front desk came running downstairs. I was in a class, and he said, "You sold your painting." I said, "You're kidding me." I was so excited. It was $325, and I was thrilled. And I says, "All right." And from then on, I've just, I hooked up with you, and I'm just pushing on to grow as an artist and
Well, good. Well,
promote.
we have, Sydney, we have a lot to talk about, and I want to go
Yes.
ahead and jump into your images. And I want to, as we get going here, thank all of you who took the time to provide some feedback through the online form, did some review of the work. And even though I don't, because of time limitations, we don't get to all of your comments. I want you to know that I read every single one of those, and it helps guide the direction of our conversation. And we will get to a lot of those comments as we're looking at the work today. So we have 5 images of the watercolors here. And we actually kind of got a bonus, Sydney, with your work, because most of the images you sent showed the presentation and the framing, which is going to kind of add another dimension to our conversation. And we're going to see some themes in the comments. And I suspect we'll kind of hear echoes of those themes in our conversation that we have here. But let's just kind of look through those images. And tell us, Sydney, so we're kind of seeing size-wise 16 by 20, 2024. Is that scale pretty typical of your work?
Yes. It's usually a quarter sheets. I did do, there's 2 that are half sheets.
Perfect.
I like to
So,
go actually smaller. I seem to have better composition when I go smaller.
oh,
I and I
interesting.
um, There was a thing online where somebody recommended that instead of failing, you get afraid to do a sheet, like the quarter sheet. And he says, then divide it into 4 sections and do 4 little paintings. And one of them you have to succeed in. You will succeed in. And you will
The
learn
odds are in your favor.
something. Well, the odds are also that you're going to learn more because you're doing 4 paintings
Uh-huh.
versus 1. And it really did help me this last couple weeks. This is
And
the one I sold.
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I said, this is the one I sold.
And we see that beautiful red dot in the
Oh,
lower
red
right
dot.
corner there. We love those. Talk about subject matter. You are a landscape painter, at least from the images that we're seeing here. What are you looking for as you kind of, seek out subject matter, and what draws you to the landscape?
Well, I'm a naturalist, and I've always been an outdoor person. I work for a conservation district, and so I'm out in nature. And I've also been a photographer for many, many, many years, and from my first Brownie Star Flash. So I already had a sense of setting up a picture and um, knowing how to frame a picture just in the photography. I've sold photography too. And but most of these are places I've been. That's Springbrook Creek where we used to snowshoe. And I'm just looking for things that will create a memory for somebody, a mood. I I I like the favorite ones that I like are ones that bring like an emotion, whether it's a moody emotion or a sunny day emotion. But I like my ones that make me feel something, not just. I
Evocative
mean,
work.
right? Like this is just a pretty picture, right?
So let's begin by talking a little bit, as I am wont to do. I love to talk about consistency in the work, artistic consistency, and I would love to pull a few of you in from the panel and just get your kind of instantaneous reaction to what you see in terms of the consistency of the work. Do you feel that the work ties together? Would you recognize the work as having been created by one artist? Just kind of some of your feedback in terms of consistency. So those of you who are in the panel, if you just want to throw a hand up in front of your camera, I'd love to bring you in to get your comments. And if you don't volunteer, I may volunteer you. So let me go first to Casey. I think I've got you. Good morning, Casey.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's nice to be here. Very nice work. I think it has an overall sensitivity, and there's definitely consistency of palette. I do think that there is a difference in some of the pieces in rendering and detail. And in my humble opinion, I think the softer pieces are the more successful. When you delve into, and trust me, I'm right there with you, when you delve into an overabundance of detail, you lose some of the delicacy of the medium. And, you know, God bless watercolorists. I admire you guys. I play around with it a little bit from time to time myself, but what I do there is very abstract and very intuitive and multimedia. When I do my representational work, it's oil. This is lovely. I'm not surprised that you sold it. I think it's very evocative. It again has a sensitivity. It's a lovely composition. It's a beautiful, serene palette. It has strong points of interest. And it's something that I think would be very soothing to have in your home. So bravo on that, and congratulations on your sale. It's nice work.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. It's nice work. And I think if you look at these pieces, I think these are the ones that probably are going to resonate more with people than the ones where you try to get really super representational.
Yeah.
Just again, my humble opinion, just artist to artist. I like them all, but this one's really nice. Yeah.
Yeah,
Really
and
nice.
you
Thanks,
know,
Jason.
great points. And I think that for whatever reason, somehow watercolor has gotten a little bit, I think, of short shrift in the art world. There's been this sense that you know, if there's a hierarchy of media, that oil is somewhere up at the top, and acrylic, and you know, then you've got pastel and watercolor and all these others that come in behind. And I just don't. I just feel like there are some things that you can accomplish and do in watercolor that you just can't do in any other medium. Like this piece that we're looking at right now, those clouds and kind of that misty feel. I love watercolor, and my wife and I have collected a number of watercolor pieces, and I too admire watercolors for what they can accomplish. Of course, what we don't get to see when we're looking at completed watercolors are all the ones that didn't work out. And,
Right.
you know, that, of course, some of the challenge with watercolor being that if it doesn't work out, sometimes there's just not much you can do to fix it. But I think that also kind of adds to the charm of watercolor work. I wonder, any other
Very
comments
organic.
on consistency? From the rest of you, agree with Casey? Any disagreement? What do you feel in terms of the body of work? Is it cohesive? Does it work together? And I think we must. Cecilia, do you want to hop in? Good. Let me grab you. Good morning. I think I've got you.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, I think I agree. After going through a second pass here and looking at them all together, I agree. I think this mountain scene is striking, and the birds with those colors that you used in there. I think that's a more consistent palette, a more consistent direction. I think you ought to stay on that vein with these color combinations. This is beautiful. The boats is my favorite, but it does shift a bit from that other theme with those darker colors you have in the mountains. The mountain range with the misty background is gorgeous. I think you should stick with that. The colors in this winter scene is striking with the water. Yeah, I think you should stick with that color palette. Stay in this intensity. I like to compliment you on your framing and matting.
And good, yeah. We're going to talk. Cecilia, we're cutting in a little bit now with the volume of the auto, but great comments, and I agree that you know, just palette wise and the subject matter and technique, there is a lot of consistency there. And we will talk about framing, and in fact, I have some questions about it. But as a gallery owner, I'm always thinking about display and experience that viewers are going to have. I could see that, taking these 5 pieces, and of course, we only get to see 5 pieces, so it's a pretty small sampling. But just taking this work, I would not see any problem with having it hung together and having people recognize the work as having been done by one artist. And I think a lot of consistency there. Let's talk. I think we've already kind of hit on technique. Let me hop up to presentation. And I do have a couple just quick images that show the frame. I've had several comments on the frame already. And the quality of the framing looks very good. And I think what you're going to see, we're going to have a few questions about reconciling the framing with the pricing that we're seeing on these pieces. So we're going to have a little bit of a conversation about that. But Sydney, talk a little bit about how you select your framing and what your process for framing is.
Well, I take my watercolor and I go down to Hobby Lobby and we look for a mat that I think will work. And I have them cut it and pick out a frame, and they do it for me. They frame
Perfect.
it.
And so really it's happening on a piece by piece basis. You're finding what will create a harmonious matting and framing with the individual pieces. And I do see that as a pretty common approach among artists who are doing particularly work that needs to be behind glass. It needs to be matted. There's this sense, well, we want to find, the kind of exactly the right mat and frame to enhance and show this piece. Now, there's nothing wrong with that and let me get back to some of the images of the work. There's nothing wrong with that from a piece by piece basis. But the one challenge is, and I would see this as a challenge if I were hanging the work in the gallery, is that by having a wide variety of moldings and mats, now suddenly you're breaking up some of the consistency that you're attaining in the imagery itself. And particularly if I were putting together a group of work for an exhibition or a showing in a gallery, I would start to think, what could I do to bring the presentation together and eliminate some of the variety that I'm introducing by having all these different mats? And in most cases, when I'm working with artists, my suggestion is narrow it down to just 2 or 3 different molding and mat options. Now there can be a little bit of mix and match in terms of, am I going to go with a dark mat or a light mat? But if you can just take some of that inconsistency out of the mix, and even sometimes you're going to end up saying, well, then I'm going to end up with a mat that's not perfectly ideal for this particular composition or this particular palette that I used. But what I find is that by having that cohesive presentation, as long as it's not radically inappropriate for the artwork that it's showing, suddenly the cohesion becomes dramatically stronger. As you walk into a gallery and see 7 or 8 pieces that are all framed and matted very consistently, it really helps tie that work together. And from a collector's standpoint, it actually makes it easier for them to buy multiple pieces because they know they're going to work well together. It may take a little bit of experimentation to find the combination of frame and mat that you feel would have the broadest suitability to your work. But then once you've done that work and found the right presentation, suddenly framing becomes a lot easier too, because now you're not having to make decisions each and every time you take a piece to the frame, or you've got these 2 or 3 or 4 options. You're just going to select the one that you feel works best for that piece, and now all the work is going to be consistent. Love to get comments either from Sydney or the panel on that concept of consistency. Let me go to Karen first, and then I'll go to Kate. Good morning, Karen.
Hi. Yeah, of course, I've been at this quite a while, but I found that when I was with the guild, they had options for buying framing that I put together myself just to cut down on the cost. And so I had these cut things. They were all the same size, and I did an awful lot of 16 by 20s. So, and I found that it just looked better to have a mat that was just a little bit off white because watercolor needs to breathe. It can't be closed in; it's too delicate. And then a thin frame around, which was usually silver or maybe gold, depends. But yeah, it was just so easy for me to just put it up, and then hey, this consistent show was always there. It was so easy to do.
Perfect. Let me go to Kate, and then I'll go up to Pam as well. Good morning, Kate.
Morning. Once I figured out what color and style of framing to use, it took a huge burden off of my mind, because when I started out, choosing the frame was one of the worst parts of making art, and I took a painting workshop, but the guy made frames in his basement. So I really got to see the process. And once I saw, okay, I want black frames, gold fillet, for my more, my landscapes. With my horse paintings, I like to use a gallery wrap. But if it's just the traditional, I will use a modern frame, same colors. And that's worked out really well. I also do my own framing. I go through American Frame. You just have to, measure twice, cut once, when you're reporting your numbers to online. But you get it and you can assemble it. I also found and this is what's so good about being around other artists, especially ones that are established. I was like, where can I get frames that aren't going to be like highway robbery? And King of Frames in California is awesome and far less expensive. So I just can't afford to go to Michael's or any of these other more traditional kinds of frame shops.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna ask some questions about that one too in just a moment. Let me go to Pam, and then we're gonna switch gears just a little bit. Good morning, Pam.
Hi, yeah, just real quick. I had a show a few years ago with 42 watercolor pieces, and we did they were all different sizes, and we did 2 frames, but the framing was in the same design line, so they went really well together. And then I only did white or black mats, and then because just a few of them really needed the black. But it made everything so much more simpler just to have no other options, because there's a billion gorgeous frames out there, but
literally an infinity of potential
literally
options,
yeah
different combinations that you could create. Yes, Sydney, let's get you in and your response.
I agree, and actually with I can't remember which company. It's either Cheap Joe's or Jerry's. I've bought a box of 25. They come 25, and it's a kit that gives you your mat, the backing that goes on the back of your watercolor, and a clear plastic sleeve. And they are so reasonably, they're cheap. It's like $2.50 a piece, and I can't buy. And what I got was the cream colored, which was because I noticed that it looked, the white looked bad against the watercolor papers, more an off-white, like the one lady said. So yeah, I did get them in cream, and they're wonderful because I do it and I put it in there, and then I've got them in my inventory set up that way. They're all protected and ready to go in frames.
Perfect. Yeah, and
Hobby Lobby only charges me $2.50 to put all that stuff on the back, to wire it, and they put the bumpers on it, and they do everything for $2.50. So I can't see doing it myself and struggling to get those little things and the wood
for the
and
service. Well, and so I think the one other thing that we would get from that, then moving towards a very consistent, especially if it is the fully framed
mhm.
glass presentation, and finding a consistent presentation there. I think the ancillary benefit of that is that suddenly any of your work that you feel like this just isn't going to work in that frame, it's actually not a sign of something being wrong with the frame. It's a sign that maybe this work is too far outside the range of work that I've been doing, that maybe it doesn't fit in with the body of work and should sit to the side. So there can be a lot of benefits in just narrowing that focus and having the gallery ready pieces. Now, let's switch gears. So that was one suggestion, start working towards a consistent frame. Now, the other overwhelming feedback that I got is related to, let me pull it up here, pricing. There was a lot of consternation as reviewers went through your work and noticed the listed pricing. And I think Arthur from California kind of sums it up. He says, I hope after the critique, you feel comfortable charging more for your artwork, especially if you're selling them matted and framed. And so let's talk about that, Sydney. How have you come up with, and let me just, let me throw Michelle's in. It's not a technical comment, but the price seems low on these works. The framing alone must cost the artist $150 to $200, double mats, glass frames, etc. Yet the works are priced in the mid 300s. I'm doubly interested as I too have difficulty with pricing. Comment. And so talk to us a little bit about how you've arrived at the price points.
Well, I've just looked at the prices of the other work in our cooperative gallery and thought if I priced them higher, they would all be asking, who do I think I am? And it wouldn't sell. They wouldn't sell in our town. Nobody has sold a painting for more than $200 in our gallery. And most of them are smaller paintings. I mean, I sold a lot, $50, $75 paintings. But
So
this is the first time I said, this is my chance with this guild show. And so my fellow artists have told me before, your work's not going to show here in this town. You have to find a better gallery and you'll find out what your paintings are really worth.
From what you've said so far about the co-op, Sydney, and I want to be careful and sensitive into how I say this, but my response would be run, don't walk. If it's not showing the work well and the price points are too low and things aren't selling, this is not a sign to me of there being an issue with your work. There's a sign that the venue just is not a place where we should be spending our time. And ultimately,
yeah.
As you think about, your business, your art business, and your revenue and sales and profitability, you can, if you're not careful, be stuck in venues that just aren't conducive to generating the sales at levels that you need to. In a sense, rather than being in a venue and from that venue choosing your price, I would suggest doing it the other way around. Let's get a price point that is right for your work. In other words, that's going to allow you to have a profit margin on the work and frame the work the way you want to. And then let's go find venues where you can sell the work. And, if I had just been looking at your work and had not seen any of your information about pricing and hadn't known where you were located or venue, my natural inclination would be for those size works, you should be somewhere between 900 and 1250, even a little north of that. To get started. And frankly, I have purchased a watercolor that was several $1,000s in that size range. And, it's all a function of, okay, who are the buyers in that particular market? And, you mentioned that your conservative market might not support those higher prices. Well, my response to that is, okay, let's go find some other markets. there's just no reason to be spending our time chasing after $325 sales that we're having a hard time getting, when we could go out to venues where collectors will be thrilled and think that they're getting the biggest bargain in the world to pay $1,500 for one of your pieces. I see I've got several comments coming in. Let me first go to the video panel, and then I also have some hands raised over among other attendees. Casey, I think you had a comment. Let me pull you in. Oh, hold on, Casey. There we go. I think I've got you now. Sorry about that.
Okay. Am I muted?
Nope, you're
No.
loud and clear now.
Very, very germane to what you're talking about. This morning in my inbox, there was an email. I can't remember who it was from, Faso, maybe, who knows? I get a million, talking about the concert violinist who performed in the subway in New York moments after appearing someplace prestigious, Carnegie Hall or something. Yeah. Normally he makes about $1,000 a minute for his performances, but in the subway, people didn't even stop to listen, let alone throw
a dollar or two into the
yeah. So context is so important, and perception is so important. We not only have to produce the best art we possibly can, we have to be consistent in our presentation, we have to tell our stories, and we have to do it in the right place to the right audience. So, yep, I think you need to get the heck out of there.
Good. Other comments? And here's some coming in the chats. From Mark, he says price equates quality. $300 is the price for yard sale art. And that's kind of an interesting way to think, turning things around backward and thinking, well, I'm not in a venue that can support the higher prices, and I'm not an experienced artist and haven't sold in major galleries, and so I've got to keep my prices low. Well, I would again turn that on its head and say, well, the only way anyone knows the quality of your work or how experienced you are is by the price tag that's on it. And we're actually, the message that we're sending by having those lower prices is exactly the opposite of the message that we would want to be sending. So, I think that would be some of the overwhelming advice that we saw in the comments and in this conversation, is that you're worth more than that, Sydney. We want to get your work out and where it can be seen and enjoyed and appreciated and valued where it should be valued. Now, I do also have to just quickly make one other comment about towns and art markets that are underdeveloped. Because I cannot tell you, now I don't, in your particular case, I can't say this about your town, but I once had an artist come into the gallery and show a portfolio to me, and I was looking at it, and it was very, very similar in situation. I could see that the work was of a high quality, but there were the price tags, and they were just extremely low. And I asked about the prices, and the artist said, well, the little town I'm from in Kansas, there is just no one there that will pay more than $300, $400 for a piece of art. And I said, oh, really? Wait, what's the town? And proceeded to tell me the name of the town. And I had to say, well, that may be generally true, but I have to tell you, I have a very good client who lives in your town. We ship art to him every single year. And I think the least he's ever spent with us was $3,000 or $4,000 on a piece of art. I see this. I mentioned I'm in Pine Top right now. Well, we opened our gallery in Pine Top last summer, and up to this point, price points being asked in the little galleries here and art shops were pretty low with that same kind of thought process. And sometimes it's just that we're not giving buyers the opportunity or the show space to spend more. They want to spend more. They want to have the quality art. And so instead of buying it locally, they're flying out to Scottsdale or Los Angeles or Chicago, buying art there and having it shipped home to them. Now, that's not to downplay the challenge if you're in a venue, a little gallery that, as you mentioned, is co-op and there are politics involved, and it's hard to get everybody in a consensus, and the show space isn't what you'd want it to be. You might not be able to raise your prices dramatically in that venue, But we just don't want to assume that we couldn't sell at better prices and have that that hold us back. I wonder, other comments, questions. Debbie, let me see if I can pull Debbie in over from the attendees. Good morning, Debbie. Oh, I've got you here, but let's see if I can get you unmuted. Debbie, it looks like you might need to give permission to use your microphone. And if not, we'll just roll on down. Anyone else in the video panel who wanted to make a comment on pricing? Pam. Oh, hold on.
I got it.
There
Sorry
we
about that. I don't know if it's really about pricing, because now you're making me think that maybe I still need to raise my prices again. But however, I do live part of the year in Battle Creek, Michigan, which is a supremely unartistic place to be, uncultured and all the rest of it. So I don't bother really showing any place there. I mean, they don't really even have a gallery that I have found. So, but I did manage to sell a piece to my friend and next door neighbor, who told me when I met her that she doesn't buy original art. She thinks it's a colossal waste of money. But then about a year later, she asked me about a particular piece that she'd seen me post on Facebook, and then she bought it on the spot for full price, I might add, which I was kind of afraid to do, because she already told me she doesn't like to spend money. So, but I screwed up my courage and gave her the full price, and she bought it. And now she wants to buy another piece of mine, which is more expensive.
Yeah. So just, you just never know.
Mhm.
And, I would rather assume that somebody's going to be willing to buy a piece and willing to pay full price, and then work my way back from there.
Thank you.
The other way around. And, you never know when you're going to be pleasantly and dramatically surprised. Sydney.
Yeah, and Casey too, though. But Casey makes a great point. It is about context. If you're showing your stuff in a sloppy space that people with, who want to spend money on great stuff, they're not shopping there. They're not going to some hole in the wall rundown. They might go to a cool hole in the wall with great lighting, but they're not going to go to just a meh place.
Yep.
Thanks.
Sydney.
I was going to say that my oil painting teacher always told us, if you have a piece of art in a shop for sale and it's not selling, raise the price.
It is an
You
old
don't
adage.
lower the price, you raise the price.
Yeah. And believe me, I do understand it is an intimidating prospect to think about a price increase. It is intimidating in our current environment to be thinking about pricing. But ultimately, all you have to do is spend some time visiting galleries or even visiting artist websites and gallery sites, and looking at the different price points that are being asked. And you quickly realize, I would hope that all of us here would say, my work is in this same class. I'm creating work that is of a quality that is just as interesting as this work, and having a little bit of that perspective of what's going on in the market can really give some perspective. And don't be afraid to raise prices. It's a balancing act. Obviously, I wouldn't suggest that you suddenly, Sydney, go from $325 to $32,500. That would be maybe a little bold. But in the long run, as we can start to find demand for your work, there should be that constant upward pressure on the value of your work. As an artist, with each piece being hand created, you have a limit to the number of pieces you can create during your career and during your lifetime. And so we just need to make sure that we're optimizing and maximizing the value that we can get. And the other thing I would just say, and we'll have to close on this because we're running out of time, but that is that in some ways, we're almost cheating our clients out of some of the pleasure and experience that they get if our prices are too low. The value that they get out of the work is what they were willing to trade for that. And if it's too low, we're not only cheating ourselves, but our clients as well. Sydney, thank you so much for being willing to join us and look at the work. We're going to there's going to be a little bit of an innovation here in the next couple of weeks with our online critique group, because I'm just not getting to all of the great comments that have come in. So watch for we're going to set up a Facebook group where if I don't get a chance to share your comments, we'll be able to share those comments with the whole group there as well. But thanks to everyone for joining us for this session. It's always fun to see
so
your
much.
work. Yeah, Sydney. Thanks
Thank you,
so
ladies,
much.
for
And
joining.
we'll look forward to being here. Keep an eye out for an email for next week's session. Take care, everyone. Be well.
Bye.